Machiavellian. Today, the word is a clinical label for the worst traits in human ambition. We use it to describe the colleague who sabotages a rival, or the leader who views deceit as a necessary professional skill. For 5 centuries, this single adjective has served as our shorthand for political evil. The name itself has now become a universal symbol for the cold-blooded pursuit of power at any cost. Niccolò Machiavelli was a middle-class civil servant. He spent his career working deep inside the gears of the Florentine state, far from the throne rooms he would eventually describe. This bureaucrat was a fiercely dedicated Republican patriot. He spent his life fighting for a government of the people, which makes the legacy of his most famous book a profound historical irony. When Florence operated as a free republic, Machiavelli was its primary diplomat. For over a decade, he worked out of the Palazzo Vecchio, managing foreign policy and organizing local militias to defend the city's freedom. That career ended in 1512. The Medici family reclaimed power with the help of a Spanish army, effectively dismantling the Republic and its institutions overnight. Machiavelli was immediately stripped of his office. Within months, he was falsely accused of conspiracy, imprisoned, and subjected to the strappato, a brutal form of torture, before being exiled to a rural farm. Here is the paradox. This is the moment when a man who suffered at the hands of tyrants sat down to write The Prince, history's most famous guide for absolute dictators. From his farm in San Casciano, Machiavelli watched as Italy was carved up by foreign powers and internal betrayals. He saw a peninsula in total collapse. He realized that the political theories of the past were useless. Thinkers like Plato had spent centuries describing imaginary republics, idealized worlds where leaders were guided by perfect morality. Machiavelli chose to document things as they actually are. He stripped away the religious and moral filters of the Renaissance to study the raw mechanics of how power is gained, kept, and lost. This approach made him the world's first true political scientist. He treated the state as a biological entity to be dissected, examining its functions with cold, clinical detachment. The core of his study led to questions that still define leadership today, most notably whether it is better for a ruler to be feared or loved. He argued that fear is the only reliable foundation for power, while love is a voluntary bond that people break the moment it serves their interest. Fear is a unidirectional force controlled entirely by the ruler. He described the chaotic influence of fate as fortuna. To Machiavelli, a leader's only defense against this chaos was virtue, not moral virtue, but raw willpower and the capability to adapt to any crisis. For a practical example, he pointed to Caesar Borgia. Borgia was a commander who used extreme ruthlessness to consolidate power and bring order to a lawless region. Machiavelli's logic was based on a grim calculation. A ruler who uses targeted cruelty to ensure peace is more merciful than a kind ruler whose weakness allows a country to descend into civil war. Because of these points, the prince is often seen as an endorsement of tyranny. But in reality, Machiavelli viewed absolute rule as emergency medicine, a temporary necessity to stabilize a failing state. His more extensive work, the Discourses on Livy, provides a much clearer view of his long-term goals. In this text, he argues that the only way to achieve lasting stability is through a republic, a state governed by laws, not the whims of a single man. His dark advice was a desperate attempt to help a leader unify a fractured Italy. He believed that only a unified nation could eventually sustain the republic he truly wanted. Machiavelli died in obscurity in 1527, just weeks before his beloved Florence briefly regained its republican freedom. He never saw the unified nation he envisioned. Centuries later, Francis Bacon observed that Machiavelli's real contribution was simple. He tells us what men do, not what they ought to do. By documenting the reality of power, Machiavelli provided the first candid account of political behavior. He didn't invent the tactics of the state. He simply provided a map of how they have always worked. There is one final detail that shifts the meaning of his work. While the political philosophy of his time was written in scholarly Latin for the elite, Machiavelli wrote The Prince in the Tuscan vernacular, the language of the street. By choosing the language of the people, Machiavelli effectively broke the elite monopoly on political secrets. He took the hidden tactics of the ruling class and explained them to the public, allowing everyone to see the true mechanics of power for the first time.